All right, we are digging for wisdom, and this is sadly our last episode of the football season, but happily it's the state championship weekend, which we've all made our way to. We've been excited about. It's here in AT&T Stadium, so I'll be able to get to all the games. I don't know if Dixie's going to go to any of them. Are you going to go to any of them or some of them? Or
I'm going on Wednesday. I got to go check out. I got to go check out the snake farm. I think because Ray Wiley Hubbard tweeted and said that he would be unavailable to be there to perform it live because he'll be in Taos. Maybe I'll go perform it live. I know you don't know this, but I've got a musical background, and I think I can go snake farm. It's a little bit nasty. Snake farm. Ooh.
Oh my goodness!
I think I can do that.
You do have a musical background. I'm learning something new about you every day, huh? Man, it's these state title games, as we know, a lot of them, the 6A ones at least, are going to be Dallas versus Houston. But all day Friday, all day Saturday are going to be all DFW games except the middle one there on Friday. My question to you is, are we going to see competitive games? And if we are, where's that going to be? Or do we want to go through them one at a time? Or can you give me a blank?
One at a time. I don't think we're to the point now, and you can even look at this back in the regional the regional finals and then the state semifinals. I mean, just this past week, point spreads of 42, 24, 36, 28, 12, 11, 23, 37, 38, 21, 28, and 14. I mean, when you get to and then 20 and 14 for the 2A Division II schools. When you get to this point, usually you have a team that is playing on a very high level, and I think you could probably make the argument that 8 of these 12 games are pretty much, I think a majority of people are going to pick one thing. That doesn't mean it always happens like that. We can all pick one thing and something else happens. That's the beauty of the state championship. Also, just the unpredictability of the state championship. Injuries happen, especially at the smaller schools. One player could be the equivalent of 2 players because if you lost a key contributor who plays both ways, that could be a big deal, even if it was just a knockout for a quarter or concussion or something. Obviously, you never want to see that sort of thing. But that's the whole point of you want to get here. Because if you get here, you get a chance. And if you got a chance, you can make magic. Big things happen. I mean, Ward, you see it all the time. Like in college hoops, you just got to get there sometimes. Yeah. And if you get there, you can make magic happen. And
you can give yourself a puncher's chance. And then that first matchup we're talking about, we're going to start right off at 6A Division I. And we've seen this thing, this is the 5th out of the last 6 years. And they made magic happen the first time they played. It's probably the best state final game ever on that Hail Mary. But Duncanville's playing North Shore again. They took care of them last year to get their first state title since the late 90s. And it's because one of the main reasons because, North Shore had that backup quarterback and their wide receiver throwing in their quarterback. They got Caleb Bailey in there now. And he's playing solid football. But this is still a game where Duncanville should be a heavy favorite just because they got the best player in the nation in just about every position there. Defensive end, running back, wide receiver. It's hard to slow them down, and they've only had, they've beaten everybody by at least 6 touchdowns in the playoffs. It's been ridiculous. Caden Durham's got more rushing yards in the playoffs than he had during the 10 regular season games. They're just clicking on all cylinders since that loss to DeSoto earlier in the year.
Now, I've got a devil's advocate for you because, North Shore's run has been a little bit tougher. I mean, they had to play a full 48 minutes. If North Shore and Duncanville goes 48 minutes, and you just kind of cited the statistic that Duncanville has been playing their thirds in the third and fourth quarter coming on, is that a benefit for North Shore that Duncanville might not be ready to play a 48-minute game because the one 48-minute game they had to play this year, they lost.
That's a good point. I mean, that very well could be the case. But unlike that DeSoto game, if they play 48 minutes, it's not because it's going to be a shootout. I don't think. If they play 48 minutes, it's because North Shore somehow shut them down to be in the 20s, and then all of a sudden we have a 24-24 game in the fourth. But I don't see that happening. Do you?
A couple of variables I think are important, and one of them I think is a valid argument that maybe I shouldn't be making, but I feel like for the judiciousness of our podcast, I think we should share our journalistic opinions. And I think for this specific year, I'm not going to go ahead and broaden it out past this year. It's really probably unfair that this thing is at Arlington because you've got 3 schools back to back, all within 10 miles, who get to have a normal Saturday. That Saturday they get to go home, they get to sleep at home. They don't have to wake up early and prepare. And you got 3 schools around the state who are going to either have to spend the night in Arlington or get up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning to make it there. Whereas the Dallas schools are going to have their normal routine. And these are all 3 schools that have won a state championship. So they're familiar with this. They're familiar with the routine. And at least 2 of the 3, it's their first time here in this run. North Shore probably feels like, AT&T is a second home. So I think that is a factor. And you're talking about indistinguishable teams, and we're talking about intangibles at this point. That's going to be an intangible for Duncanville over North Shore. That's going to be an intangible for DeSoto over Humboldt Creek. And I think even for Port Neches Grove over against South Oak Cliff. We know that Port Neches Grove crew is going to come up I-45 and bring it out. But still, it's going to be that 11 a.m. game. They're either going to have to come the night before or they're going to have to wake up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning to make sure they get there. That's going to wear on you. Even if you go the night before and get a hotel, it's still not your routine. You're not sleeping in your bed. You're not sleeping in your experiences. And there's also research out there where, and I can give you this because I'm a psychology professor, and whenever you're in a hotel for the first night, your sleep is by far the worst because you have a fight or flight mechanism, and it's just completely an unfamiliar setting. So you are basically completely out of your rhythm if you spend the night there, or if you get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, you're having an issue there as well because you're out of routine. South Oak Cliff is going to be completely in routine, all of DeSoto and Duncanville. So I think there is a factor that is going to be involved in that. And last year we had the DISD, or we had the Dallas area sweep in the 5A and 6A. I think very possible that can happen again. And as that relates to Duncanville and North Shore, that's a big factor. And I mean, we've got a first-year coach, and we've talked about this repeatedly on our podcast, and even back in the campfire, we're talking about first-year coaches and how that impacts things. And even though, it's not his first time at this dance, it's his first time having to control all of these mechanisms. And I think when you look at the fact that Duncanville has just been, they seemed offended by the DeSoto loss. Like, we played horrible and they got lit up. And the fact that they beat North Crowley the way they did, Ward, I told you this, that I was going to pretty much base my whole opinion based on last week. You had North Shore had to go a dogfight against Westlake, 48 minutes for that game to be decided, whereas Duncanville had that thing pretty much in the bag at halftime. Mm-hmm. I'm sticking with Duncanville on this one. I just think there's too much going against Galena Park, North Shore, even the little things, that it's going to make it very hard for them to overcome that.
I agree with you. And another factor is we've had it at AT&T Stadium for, a good 10 years now, 17 years, whatever it's been. That takes all the variables out of it because North Shore changed their offense completely against Westlake because of the wind factor. All they did was ground and pound. You didn't see Caleb Bailey throw. I think he threw 12 times, something like that, 15 maybe, and he usually can throw it many other times. But they didn't want to. They want to mess around with the air because of the wind out there, and they just ran and ran and ran. And they played a tougher. I think Austin Westlake may be tougher than North Crowley, but you may argue the other way around. Had some tougher competition out there. Having said that, it'll rely. They got one guy that could maybe stop Decorian Moore with Devin Sanchez on their DBs, but I don't know who's stopping the rest of them. I don't know who's stopping Caden Durham, and I don't know how they're moving the ball as easily as they think they may be able to against that defense, which is they just got D1 all over the place. So I think that's a North Shore, 20-point win. Duncanville 20-point win.
And isn't it crazy that Decorian Moore, I mean, as we get going on to the podcast, we're going to talk about Jacob Emmers and what a factor he is. Decorian Moore may be one of the best receivers in the state of Texas, recruiting-wise. And, he's just kind of an afterthought. Duncanville could win a state championship if he catches 1 for 7 yards. I mean, that's how loaded Duncanville is across the board. And really their reliance on Caden Durham has been great, and he's been willing to go up to the task. And you talk about more at a micro level. We've talked about that defensive line. That's going to be such fun football, the line play. But everything, it just seems like Duncanville just has a little bit more of an advantage. Now, you kind of talked about the comparison between North Crowley and Westlake. It's so hard to make that comparison. I think what I said last week about size was really the key factor when it came to North Crowley. They just couldn't compete with Duncanville, and they got blasted. And sometimes in these games, when one team is just a little bit better on all all phases of the game can get ugly. I'm almost concerned that this game could get ugly. This could be one of those blowouts. If Duncanville just has enough of the intangibles to where they're just that much better and put in all those other things we talked about, Duncanville could finally get that win where they make a point. And then maybe one of the things we would be talking about in a realignment podcast or a hypothetical thing was who would have won a DeSoto and Duncanville rematch. I'm sure that will take a lot of the Facebook groups something to talk about until you get to realignment.
Yeah. Yeah, that kind of brings us up to the next one. I'd love to – I mean, we were both at the DeSoto game against South Lake Carroll. Man, it is hard to give that ball up 4 times and still put up 45 points and look virtually unstoppable on offense, except for when you drop that ball on the ground or throw the pick. Boy, that offensive machine, it's going to be hard for Summer Creek to slow down. And if they can't slow them down right off the start, that last tip of the night Saturday could get out of hand really quick.
In a world where we use a lot of cliches, talk about potential ceilings and turnovers and this and that, you and I were both down there at points of the game, down there on the DeSoto sidelines, on the Carroll sidelines, and that DeSoto offensive line is ridiculously big. I mean, you standing next to a 6'9" guy, and he might even be 6'10", if he may be slouching on media day because they will just wear on you. And you can see that with the Carroll. One of the things you'll see coaches talking about is that you have to do the work in the offseason because in December, that's when it's going to pay off. They were whipped. I mean, at the end of that game, South Lake Carroll was whipped by having that DeSoto offensive line just lean on them 7 to 10 yards at a gash. And DeAndre Ryden had almost 250 yards in this game, maybe even just a little bit over, depending on which stats you're using. And they just wore them down, had over 600 yards of offense. And like you said, 4 turnovers for DeSoto and still kind of won that game comfortably. There was not a point where I was seriously considering that DeSoto was going to lose that game. I mean, it was just they got some separation there at the end, but they took care of business not playing their best game. Now, you can give the Summer Creek argument because Summer Creek's got the athletes. They showed up against Cibolo Steel and had it one of their best games, but you can kind of look at that Hightower game as the game that, maybe exposed them a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. And going back really quickly to DeSoto, those big offensive linemen, it's one thing to see them and then, okay, they just push me around and let me catch my breath. They're not letting you catch your breath. They run that hurry-up offense every time they have the ball, especially if they get the thing going. Maybe if they run into some trouble, they'll stop and do a little huddle or something. But that thing's moving over and over again at a fast pace, and you can't catch your breath. And I think that's where the problem may lie there with Summer Creek. Now, Summer Creek, interesting fact with them is and I just found this out recently because I'm up here in DFW producing a Houston show, but their quarterback, Blake Thomas, he found out he was going to be quarterback a week before the season started because their starting quarterback, Tristan Sanchez, tore his ACL in the scrimmage. And all of a sudden, this wide receiver moves over to quarterback. Now, he's more of a game manager. I call him a Brock Purdy type because he's kind of just manage it, make sure things don't go wrong because Lloyd Avant is their big running back, and he gets the ball 25 to 30 times a game. But if DeSoto shuts down the run, and that's a big if because they certainly didn't do it against South Lake, and they haven't done it in a lot of games. They gave up, 500 yards of offense last week. So that may be one key for the Summer Creek to score a little bit. But I just can't see how they're going to react to something like that. They have one defensive player that's of note, Xavier Atkins, a linebacker who's going to LSU. He transferred in from Louisiana to get away from a bad element that he was around there, and he's been a surprising star down there in the Houston area because they hadn't seen him all year. But one guy's not going to stop the trio of running backs that you're going to see a lot from DeSoto.
We do rely on stats and yardage quite a bit here, but sometimes we get to see the games and we kind of see them play out. And to me, that Carroll 500 yards felt a little bit empty at times because they had 2 big plays that got about 160, 170 of those yards. They had the drive late, which got them another 70 or 80. But at times when they had to get 5 yards in 4 plays down, they couldn't do it. Down in the red zone, down on the goal line, they struggled with that. And DeSoto has that kind of bend but don't break defense. You kind of saw it against Willis as well, where Willis got their yards. DJ Lagway got the numbers against them, but it was just like yeah, that's nice, but what did that mean in that situation? It was very meaningless, and I feel like a lot of the South Lake Carroll yards were in big plays, and they all count the same at the end of the day. But I never really felt like they could just go from 75 yards in 12 plays against DeSoto.
Right.
It had to be big play, schemed, something like that, because eventually DeSoto would make a play. And I don't know if Summer Creek can do that. Can Summer Creek, and that's my question for you, go 12 plays, 75 yards with their offensive style, or is it going to have to be big play, big play, big play to get those points?
They can do it, but they can't do it at the rapid pace that DeSoto does. I mean, they have long drives, and the thing that kind of sticks out in my mind is the contrast of the two coaches. We talked to Rodney Webb. He knows Kenny Harrison a lot, the head coach at Summer Creek. Kenny Harrison is a very laid-back kind of guy. He's a cool coach. And the intensity that Claude Mathis, and me and Claude are good friends, the intensity he brings before, during, and slightly after the game is unmatched. You've got to try to match that intensity level coach for coach, because he's going to be on the refs. He's going to be on his players. As soon as the 40-minute mark on your pregame clock starts ticking, he has got the earphones in. He's right in that thing. He's ready to go. He's intense. He's yelling. He's screaming. And Kenny Harrison's kind of more of a laid-back kind of guy. And there's also the factor is they've never been here. They're making history every time they win a game. They made a history being the only Humble IST team ever to make it to state. They made history by getting to the state semifinal, now to the final. This is borrowed time they're on right now. They're riding this thing out, see where they can go, and then you throw in the fact that you brought up late also where they have to travel all the way up here, and it's not going to be routine for them. They're going to make a new routine. It might be a tough night for the boys, the Bulldogs from Summer Creek.
What would be your path? Like if you're creating the perfect storm, what would it be? Would it be another 4 turnovers? Is it going to be special teams? What does Summer Creek have if we want to give us a little bit of optimism? Not that we have Summer Creek fans here, but for our fair and balanced journalism, what is their pathway from what you've seen in Summer Creek?
The turnover deal is a big thing, but the time of possession's got to be in their favor, like by double. They've got to have the ball double the amount of time that DeSoto does. So it means when they get the rock, they just got to, like you said, 12 for 70 yards. They got to just grind it out. If it takes you 4 downs to get a first down, that's in your favor against the DeSoto team, because if you score quick, they're going to score quick too, and then you're in trouble. So I think that's their pathway: time of possession and turnovers. And man, I can't see them making 4 turnovers again like they did last week. They're going to be.
That's like the worst thing for them is like, what are the odds of DeSoto, who's had like 10 turnovers all year, doing 4 2 straight weeks? Yeah. I mean, it just seems very unlikely given just the law of averages at that point. So I'm taking DeSoto big.
Yeah, I am too. I'm taking Aledo big too, and that's the next game we're talking about. 5A Division I. Aledo, the whole year we thought we could see their swan song in 5A, but it looks like they came up with 6 students short of going to 6A. So they'll be back in 5A again, and they're probably going to have 12 titles when they start their 5A season next year, as they look like they're going to be a big odds-on favorite. They got the nightcap Friday night against Smithson Valley. Man, I don't know how much you know about Smithson Valley, but I'll toss that question to you. How do you see them competing in this game?
The thing that has made the rounds around Aledo, I don't know if you know this, but we're Aledo famous right now because of the broken commentary. They don't like the broken commentary from the dump and from our podcast, and it's very motivating for them. And Aledo, has to kind of manufacture this chip on their shoulder right now because they've played so dominantly. And Aledo is a team that kind of reminds me of Denton Ryan for 4 or 5 years, that they're clearly the best team on the field. So we're not dealing with Aledo in the past has won with a team concept or with a good player like Jonathan Gray and just, a workable surrounding cast. This year, it seems like almost every player for Aledo who's starting could probably be playing college football at some point. It may be JUCO, maybe D2. For quite a few of them, it's going to be D1 like Hosseini and Devon Keys and some of their really good players. And even without Racing Gilroy, who some people think is the best 2026 running back, there was that debate with Osborne versus Gilroy. In that's on Facebook. You can go read it. It's a little off kilter at times. he's a good running back, and it's like they don't even really need him. And they got Jadon Finley, who's like he's not even a big factor, and he's a son of an NFL player, and he's going to be a great D1 talent, and he's coming into his own. Alito is just absolutely loaded to the point where they're overcoming 4 turnovers, 5 turnovers, special teams miscues, and it's going to catch up with them at some point. But it's probably going to be next year when it catches up with them, when they have to deal with Highland Park and or DeSoto in the state semifinals, because they are a absolute juggernaut. But Smithson Valley, what I think they're going to do is they're going to play clean football. I don't think they're going to hurt themselves by mistakes they make. And that's the dangerous part, because at some level, I think Alito is one of the bigger favorites on paper of all these teams we're going to talk about. But given the mistakes they've made, and given the style of football that Larry Hill and that program will continue to do, they have one of the biggest ceilings of outcomes that we might have, the biggest range of outcomes that we might have. I could see Alito winning this game 56-0. I could see Smithson Valley winning this game by 1 point. It would take a complete meltdown, but that's kind of what I talked about with Forney last week, and we got the more of the blowout, that if Forney is going to win, it was going to be a flukish, crazy 5 turnover kind of a win, and they get a fourth quarter, 2-point conversion to win. Or Alito might win this game by 50. And I think you kind of see this here. What is that pathway? Alito has shown that they can make special teams errors. Alito has shown that they can have 3 to 5 turnovers in a game. You're going to need all of that going your way just to win that game by 1 score. So what's the pathway for Smithson Valley? The Alito meltdown at the end of the day, and play your style of football. If Alito's defense, which is incredibly talented, their secondary is very good, if they start ball hawking and they start to force turnovers on you, call it good night.
Yeah, this will be one of those games, and you just mentioned their path may get them a 1-point win. I mean, that's your path. You're not predicting it, and I don't see that happening at all. But this is one of those games, if I'm shooting the game, I'm behind the Smithson Valley offense all the time, waiting for pick sixes and scooping scores, because that defense with Jaden Allen back there, Devon Keys, when he's not busy trying to score some cheapy touchdowns down there at the 1, they're just too hard to get through. And it's not a team that's ever going to they may have overlooked some teams in the playoffs, but when you get to the last game, you're not overlooking a team in the last game at all. You have the pedigree. Hoss Haney's already been an MVP in that title game, so why not go for 2? I just think everything's going to click together, and it's going to be a smooth thing, and I'll probably be done shooting at halftime, to be honest with you. It'll probably be 35-7 at the half. I think that's how good Alito's going to be Friday night. But we have a game Saturday morning.
Before you do that, because I don't plan on being at that game, Ward, I want everybody to look at Ward, look at that hat on his head right there. Alito fans, you can go talk to Ward. If you have a problem with my commentary, go find this guy and let him know what you thought about the DFW.
You got a problem. You got a problem with him. If you have a problem with him, you talk to me. I'll bring this humongous notepad. I write this down. Oh, Tom from Alito says you're a real
He
jerk.
will put it in my annual evaluation for all of your considerations.
I'll keep everything written down. I'll star the real. I'll X out the expletives so Diggs doesn't have to hear such horrible words. But I'll write them all down. We'll get it to him and on his exit interview for the year, because you're out of there. Now, speaking about the 5A Division II game, that's an 11 a.m. start, and I feel like that's a game I need to be there at 8 if I'm going to get in there, right? Because the crowds that are be coming for that one, especially the crowds you say may leave at 4 a.m. Well, if they leave at 4, they may get there at 8. So I better get in there. I'm not going to get in. But P&G against Sock, we saw it last year. P&G got a little bit of a lead. Sock stormed back and took them by 10. We talked about it last week. Nothing bothers Jason Todd, so I don't think if they fall down by a little bit, that he doesn't care. He's going to come back and go ahead and take care of business. But he does make a good point on Twitter. What's the deal with Danny Green? How come he's not getting any offers? I mean, we talked about kids wanting offers. The kid from Rockwell, Emory. Danny Green's another one. He's got one offer right now, and he's got over 100 yards in each of these 5 games, and they've kind of needed it because they've been in some games. 3 out of the 5 games have been competitive ball games. So tell me what you think about this game against P&G, and are we looking at another 3-peat or a 3-peat for Sock?
Sauka's had basically two personalities this year. They've had the 48-minute dominant personality, which we don't see very much, but you saw it against Lovejoy. And what was the result of that? 42-0. And then you see them take the half off and really kind of struggle, and then come back in the second half and just look absolutely dominant. You saw that against Midlothian Heritage, and you saw that against Emerson. Emerson had it was 10-10, but they had no first downs in the first half, and they only had 17 total yards of offense, and it was 10-10 at halftime because of what their defense did. Danny Green decided to take it on his shoulders and had two big touchdown runs, and then all of a sudden it goes from this incredible back and forth game to South Oak Cliff is up 3 scores, and Emerson scores a window dressing touchdown late to make it a 12-point game. Whereas on the other hand, you got Port Neches Grove, who had to battle against Liberty Hill. That was a back and forth game, and I keep saying I'm looking for style points. The fact that Port Neches Grove could not give me those style points in that game makes me a little bit concerned that they're not going to be able to take advantage of the mistakes that South Oak Cliff may or may not give them. I think we saw it last year, and I saw a great comment on Bally's where they're interviewing Jason Todd and said, what's your split of how much you look at previous games versus last year, and he said it's a 50-50 thing. They look at what they worked with last year, what kind of worked against them, what didn't work against them, and then they also kind of look and see what was working in the game plans this year and in the playoff run. So I think they're going to be a comfort level. They're going to be familiar with what Port Neches Grove is going to do. So can Port Neches Grove take advantage of any South Oak Cliff lulls, which there may not be? But if they can, I think it's got to be a 3-score advantage, because you saw last year they got up 2 scores on South Oak Cliff, and I'm sure you and I have talked about it here on the podcast. We were never concerned that South Oak Cliff was going to lose that game, even though Port Neches Grove was up 2 scores. Can they take advantage of any lull? I think that South Oak Cliff is not going to give them a lull this year. I think we're going to get 48 minutes of sock, and I think they're going to take care of business. But that we've been talking about, what is their pathway? P&G's pathway is the first half they got to get up on them and put them in a hole that they haven't been in. Because even against Midlothian Heritage, they were down by 2 scores in that game. Against Emerson, it was tied as badly as they played, so they're comfortable with that. So can P&G go up 3 scores in the first half and get enough of a buffer to take South Oak Cliff's second half defensive adjustments and offensive adjustments? I don't think they can. I don't think they're going to get up that 3 scores. But if they can, that's their pathway.
Moving on, let's talk about 4A Division I, where we talk about Anna against Chapel Hill. That's the 11 a.m. game on Friday morning. Anna had their guy Jacob Emmers kind of shut down a little bit. He got 6 catches against Decatur, but they proved they have other guys. They got the running back Chumley that came up with 140 yards. They got Sean Steens, who made some big plays in the wide receiver position, and Zayandra Williams has been perfect for him at quarterback, the guy replacing Evan Bullock. And now they've found themselves in that state title game. They're playing Chapel Hill. Tell us what you think about this game. Does Anna have a shot at winning that state title?
This is an area where I become very hypocritical, Ward, because it's happened the last 2 weeks where you and I start talking and I build the case against Anna, and by the time I'm doing my picks, I'm taking Anna, and they make me look good at the end of the day. And I feel like I could do that again because my heart is telling me Chapel Hill is the team here. But the thing that gives me more pause than anything in the previous weeks is the fact that Anna shut down Nate Palmer, the all-world running back for Decatur. Their defense against him was absolutely exceptional, and that was what I wasn't expecting. That was the variable in that game. I thought we were going to get in a track meet, but Anna's defense played as good as they played this year. And when the UIL realignment numbers came out, you can kind of start to see, because Anna is right on the fringe as a big 5A Division II school. Maybe they would have, and they are playing 4A Division for a 4A Division I state championship with those numbers, whereas Chapel Hill is kind of what they are. Chapel Hill has 3 really special players. Can Anna show us that defensive mindset that will beat them? That's what I'm going back and forth on. I feel like Chapel Hill is going to be too much for them because they have too many weapons. But the Anna that came out against Decatur, that team is going to be really hard to stop. They dominated Decatur. That game wasn't even as close as it looked because
No.
Decatur had a couple of fourth quarter garbage touchdowns. You were there, Ward. You
Yeah.
tell us what you saw with that. Were you impressed with that defense? Because that was an Anna version of the defense I have not seen this year.
I was impressed with the defense, but going back to that Nate Palmer thing, they barely gave him the ball. They only gave him the ball 13 times. From what I saw the year before when Decatur played China Spring, he got the ball all the time. He was in the kickoff return and punt returns and had the ball in his hands a lot. He barely had the ball in my eyes, so he wasn't getting it a lot. But I was very impressed with the defense. There was a spurt there in the second half, 24-3 run, which put the thing out of reach. They got themselves a turnover. I was impressed with that defense, but I don't know as much about Chapel Hill as probably you do. And what we've seen in the playoffs is that Anna has had a couple games where they had to, score late to win or hold off some teams late in the games to win or use some injuries from Stephenville to get past that one. Do they have what it takes? You're saying right now no, but I'll check back with you on Thursday when the picks are out and see what you got.
But I got to get this stuff out on Wednesday now, so I'm running out of time to figure this out and get my mind changed. I think Chapel Hill just has too much speed, but this is one of those games that it's a true 50-50 game. We're going to have some games that are not pretty, but this is going to be one of them that is going to be fun to watch. It's going to be fun to shoot. It's going to be fun to analyze, and I think it's really going to come down to coaching and the experience. Chapel Hill, despite the fact that they have not made it to the state championship, they have state championship pedigree. They made it to the state semifinals the last 3 years. I think the last state championship was the game against Alvarado about a decade ago. And Anna, the first time here. And so you have a first-time coach, first-time players, and you got a sophomore starting at quarterback. At some point, you got a figure that he's going to make a mistake, but he has been all world. And some of the haters, if you remember our arguments about Salina and Anna, talked about Coach Parr as being a quarterback expert. And what he has done with Williams this year has been right there because he's not playing like a sophomore. Anna's going to they're going to have to go up, but Anna's going to have him for 2 more years. So this might be their window, because I don't know if 5A Division II, when they get districted with Melissa and Lovejoy, if they're going to be considered a state championship favorite. But DeAndre Williams is going to make it sure fun in that district. We'll be talking a lot about that in the campfire for sure. But right now, as of today, I'm taking Chapel Hill.
Taking Chapel Hill. That means I got to take Anna, which I was going to do anyway. So there you go. I'm taking Anna.
There you go.
The 4A
will give you a big hug and say, thank you for believing in us. That digs. He never did.
He don't know what he's talking about. Now get me a hat.
And I don't. So they've proven me wrong more than once. Yeah, and like my big victory over them was picking Salina over them successfully. And then I left leaving that. I didn't go to the game, but analyzing that game, I left thinking Anna was the better team. They just had a little bit of a lull, and getting Jacob Emmers back obviously has been huge. And you can see it seems like every week they're getting healthier and better. It's like they're a juggernaut. By Tuesday it may be hard to pick against them.
I'm looking for a big game at Emmers in the state final. Somebody to make up for they didn't really go to him a lot. He did get 6 catches, but he was kind of shut down that game.
He's the kind of kid who wins MVP. He's that kind of player, a game changer who, you can run him in a reverse and he can go 70 yards. So he's a very special player, and he's a game changer. He
does use that whole field, though. You throw him a screen, he'll cut it back the whole way and do whatever it takes to get him that yardage. But 4A Division II is Belleville against Gilmer. And Belleville, I can speak on them because they're a Houston squad. We talked the whole season. They've blown everybody out. What happens when they get in a close game? Well, they finally proved it last week against Wimberley. They had to shut down a 2-point conversion in order to pull that one out. They won at 35-33. It's a slot T, dude. If you get tricked, by the slot T, then the Belleville fans get treated for a long touchdown run, because once that thing happens, they got 3 running backs, D.D. Murray, they got Sam Ranischke, and they got Corian Hood. D.D. Murray's their long threat. He's the one who takes off for the 30-plus yarders. The other one's grinded out, and it's the use of the fakes and all that stuff with the slot T we talked about last week. But then you have Gilmer, who just beat the pants off of Glen Rose. That thing wasn't even close, probably 5 minutes into the game. They had 40-something by 8 minutes into the second quarter. So they know they can put up points, too. Could this game be one of those scoreboard operators' nightmares?
We gave our basketball metaphor last week, and Iona kind of finally showed us they were Iona when it came to that. They got there, but when it was time to play ball, they became a mid major again, and they got taken to the woodshed by Gilmer. Gilmer is a little bit ahead of schedule. Gilmer, 2020, 2021, they played at AT&T, lost to China Spring in 2021. But I feel like this version of the team is still a down version of the team. Belleville is that perfect thing. So it's like, can you get ready for the slot T in a week? Can that coaching staff get this team reading those keys and seeing something in the film because how are you going to get your scout team to get that ready? It's going to be very hard for them to do it. So then it kind of falls under coaching. And I don't have anything against the Gilmer coaching staff. I think that's just a hard sell for anybody to get that ready for 1 week. That slot T, people call it the devil for a reason. And Belleville got the test. Belleville got the blue blood against Wimberley, and they shut them down. That 2-point conversion was very reminiscent of that DeSoto of the Graham Knowles run right there at the line. And just was it right there at that inch? From my perspective, it seemed like the right call. They just didn't get that extra inch, and they were able to shut it down. And they got the test. And we see it a lot of times: blowout, blowout, blowout. Then all of a sudden, you play the first real good team, and you lose. And Belleville didn't have that happen. So I feel like they are going to win this game over Gilmer because I can't see Gilmer stopping Belleville at any point. Now, Gilmer is a hard – you don't put up 79 points even against a not great team and not be a prolific offense. They put up 47 or whatever it was against Carthage. I mean, so their offense is going to be clicking. But Belleville, I mean, if they answer – that just seems like it's going to be more consistent. The slot T is something, if it works, kind of like we saw with DeSoto. DeSoto was getting 8 to 10 yards at a clip against South Lake Carroll. They're able to go up and down the field, and I think that Belleville is going to be able to go up and down the field. So give me the Brahmas.
The Brahmas, exactly. That's a way to pronounce that right. I appreciate that. And then, by the way, the people that work at AT&T Stadium, they're probably going to be looking around. It's like, hey, where's Carthage? Aren't they here every single year? What happened here? I don't know what's going on. New blood? Or get your own popcorn. I want to watch this game because I haven't seen these teams before. With that Belleville offense, it's key to be disciplined on the defensive side of the ball, and it only takes one series or one play to not be disciplined, and all of a sudden it's a 67-yard gone the other way, and it's a nightmare for them. However, if Gilmer gets up on them, and they have to pass the ball, then we got some problems here for Belleville. But I don't expect them to get behind, so it'll be a fun game, I think, if you guys are there for the 3 p.m. game.
So what's your strategy? Are you gonna take the ball first if you're Belleville? You got to get up on them quick.
Yeah, I think I would, and I'm usually not a fan of that. I think I would do that. Let's let them know what they're up against right off the bat. Now, if you don't score, if you go 3 and out, then it's a mistake. But I don't think that'll happen. Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. Boy, it's funny you mentioned that Graham Knowles play that got stopped at goal line. That's probably one of my favorite plays I've shot in the playoffs this year because had he ran it and didn't fly in the air, I think he would have scored. But when he dove and had that opportunity to get popped, and I forget who number 15 is for DeSoto, but he popped him, took off of the field. I mean, he literally landed right at the goal line. Everybody thought, oh, maybe that ball made it in there. But it was such a great play, great video of it. So I'm glad you brought that memory back before we went into 3A Division I.
I saw it went viral on Max Preps. I don't know if it was your version of it or the Harris.
Harris boys, probably the Harris boy. Everybody likes phone video instead of these high-end cameras. I need to sell my camera and just run around with this freaking phone. Apparently, that's the way it goes.
He's got the machine now, where he's like got the stick holding it, kind of.
Those Harris boys, if I can just get them to show up at games on time, there's something special. I got stuck in traffic. I said, man, what in the world? Anyway, 3A Division I. Malakoff Franklin.
A little on-the-job training. Like, I'm getting my year-end evaluation, after the Alito people come talk to you. You're going to give it to them on our realignment podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Diggs out. Harris boys come in, sit down. Let me tell me why I should keep you on. That's how I got to do it. All right, tell me what you think about Malakoff and Franklin. It looks like Franklin's playing some ball because they knocked out both of the teams. Well, they didn't have to knock out Hitchcock, but they knocked out Columbus. And they're rolling down there on that side. And then you have Malakoff, who I'm sure you're about ready to give me the business on. So let me know, because they got who? Mike Jones. Tell me what you think about that game.
DFW's own Mike Jones. Although I will go share that I went and pulled the head coach aside, and I'm like, Coach,
Oh yeah,
give me your thoughts. You think y'all are East Texas or DFW? He's like, we're clearly an East Texas team. I'm like, you don't know where you're from.
Why didn't you tell me any of that stuff, man?
Why did you answer that? Who do you know? Do you know who I am?
You ran me on Twitter all week long. You didn't give me that piece of information.
You gotta have to, but he can be wrong. Like you said, I have the right to be wrong. He has the right to be wrong too.
He goes to the Krogers, he goes to the gas stations, and they ask him, "Hey man, what do you
who do you Kroger
think?
In
East Texas? Yeah, we're East Texas.
To get your Krogers in that area.
All right, grocery store expert, tell me what you know about this game.
Just saying. I know enough to know Franklin's going to win this game. I would have picked Franklin over Brock or Malakoff. I don't think either of the DFW schools were going to win this game. Franklin is, I heard somebody make a really good point. I think it was Kenny Matthews made a really excellent point that maybe losing to Lorena in the district took that pressure of the streak away. Yeah. So now you don't got to worry about that. Now you're not worried about not only we got to beat them, but their 48 game winning streak or whatever it was, or whatever it would have been at this point. Now they just get to play football, and they lost a lot of key contributors, but they just keep moving and keep going. And that game against Lorena was a shootout. I think they lost like 52-49, and then they got the game back. They beat Lorena in the regional finals. Franklin, Malakoff probably shouldn't have won that game. That was a 5 turnover affair. And then they got the turnover late. Great game management by them to not let Brock let them score, because Brock was trying to do everything they could to get them to score and get the ball back. So great game management by Malakoff at the end to seal it. But I don't think Franklin's going to give them 5 turnovers. I think if Franklin even gave them 3 turnovers, they're probably going to be okay. But I'm going to take Franklin.
And from the video I saw from their game with Edna, Hydrago is the kid's name. They scored 4 touchdowns in the first half for Franklin, and then I think he scored a bunch in the second half. He's a receiver over there. He looks like
he go Rocky and say, "I will break you.
I will break you. I'm Hydrago, the Magnificent." But can I handle who? Mike Jones. Sorry, I just like saying it. All right, 3A Division II, and here's a little fun fact for everybody that thinks I'm a good Houston.
Was Mike Jones, by the way, in your 50 years of hip hop that you were watching before our podcast? Did he make?
You know what? He was not. I need to rewatch.
Clearly an oversight.
But they did have Rakim. They did have Rakim in there, which is what I was worried about. They wouldn't have. Best lyricist out there. Who disagrees with me? Call me up.
Eminem might.
Eminem. All right, listen to me.
Lose yourself in the music.
Oh, God, help us. Help us all. Hey, here's something I learned today.
Yesterday. While we're talking about this, Eminem has some really good metaphoric puns in his lyrical genius.
I have no problem with Eminem.
He had some smart lyrics. Just saying.
No problem with Eminem. You bring up Macklemore, then I got problems. But Eminem.
Are you not going to pop some tags?
No.
$20 in your pocket?
Oh, brother. Here we go. Listen, can we talk about 3A Division II? Because
this is awesome.
This is where I learned something about
people tune into this for our hip hop knowledge, Ward. We are the Digging for Wisdom crew, and we have to give the people their hip hop knowledge.
All right, well, we'll give it to them. We'll talk about Kwame the Boy Genius from the early '90s. Who knows about it?
Did it all start with Gangster's Paradise? Is that the start of it all?
No, is that the start of it all? God bless it. Why are you talking about Coolio on this thing? If we're
the original,
he's not the original. He's like not
Coolio's version of it, but like the 80 or
that's Rapper's Delight. Rapper's Delight.
Yes, is that not the start of it? Is that not the start of it all?
That's around the start. Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Just saying.
Gangster's Paradise. This dude right now. Man, if I could reach in there.
Hotel, motel, Holiday Inn, Ward.
If I could reach in there right now, choke you out. Well, here's what I learned yesterday. Tidehaven is a Houston school. I had no clue. Bay City, right down the block from Bay City. So I have a 4th Houston team to cover this week. And don't ask me anything about Tidehaven because I know nothing about it. I keep thinking of Tidewater, which is down there in Norfolk area. But Tidehaven's taking on Gunter. Gunter's clicking again. Your boy Walker Overman, he is over, man. Oh, man, that was stale.
I can tell you this: we had 3 of 4 regional semifinal or state semifinals. All were Tigers.
Really?
3A Division II is quite heavy in Tigers.
A lot of Tigers
How
out
about
there.
that for insight?
And then we got Tiger riding in the 6A Division II final. So that's pretty interesting. But who you got winning Gunter and Tidehaven? How much do you have Gunter winning by?
Of all 12 games, I think my biggest, highest probability of success, like if we're going to play a game where we're having an elimination league and I could pick one to like just put it all in there. Because, last week I put my hair on the line. I said if Forney could beat Alito 49
That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah, I put my hair on the line. I'm not putting my hair on the line because state championships, anything can happen. But of all the teams, I would say Gunter has the highest probability of winning, even considering six-man. So I think Gunter names their score probably 28 to 35 point margin in this game.
Well, if you're listening, Gunter, if you're going to name your score, name it 60 to 23 something so I can get some Tidehaven highlights on for them Houston folks. Don't name your score 49-0 because that would sadden me. And
preferably in the first half so you can get some crowd reaction shots, right?
Yes, crowd reaction, not depressed people and people walking up to get nachos. That's crazy. 2A Division I, you'll be there. Toller against Timpson. Can Toller stop Terry Bussey? That's the big question. I say no, but what do you say?
I say they can't stop him either at the end of the day. But learning. I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to do research on this, and this is one where I've started to shift because I've started to watch some footage on Timpson earlier in the year, and they've got some players. They've got some pieces around Terry Bussey, but two of those pieces, including their running back JJ Guidry, are not. They're injured and they're out. So now I'm looking at it. I think it's depth. And you look at Toller and you look at the depth that they have. It's not just the Peyton Brown show. In fact, when they lost Peyton Brown for the 8 to 9 weeks they lost him, they kept on going. It was Garrison Nation and Isaac Blessing, and they had some really good players. So I have kind of gone from 55-45 Timpson to 55-45 Toller, and because of reading about these injuries and seeing the difference. I've watched some footage of what their running back, and their running back, bless his heart, is not J.J. Guidry. There is a drop-off between, that and their wide receiver who is out is a drop-off between that. But you're 2A Division I. You don't have enough players on your team to really generate that depth. So can Terry Bussey do it all by himself? I don't think he can. I think at this point, and give me another podcast, I may change my mind again. But watching I thought that against Paradise, and Paradise brought out all these players injured. So who knows what we're going to see at the end of the day? And maybe one of these players that I thought would be a factor who's not playing ends up playing. Again, I don't have the injury report, but as the difference in losing those two players, I would say from looking at it, that's number 2 and number 3 on their depth chart. You got Bussey number 1; they don't have 2 and 3, and that's a big deal in 2A Division I.
It
so
is.
the snake farm.
That's a good point. And Ganado gave them a game last week. They were up by 2 touchdowns early. They had to come back behind Terry Bussey. But that's a good point about 2A and lower. I mean, it's easy to say next man up mentality. Well, the next man up may be a freshman who's scared to death. And, he's just doing it to supplement his time from band or whatever. And all of a sudden, you're next man up. I don't want to be next man up.
I want to be next man up.
Who's after me? I don't know what's going on. All right, 2A Division II. We got Albany and Mart. Mart is a mainstay, so is Albany. We've seen both of these teams a lot. So tell me who you think is going to pull this one out.
When I want the most basic formula I look at is they played each other last year in the state championship. Albany won that game by 3 touchdowns. Did Mart get 3 touchdowns better, or some combination of Albany getting 3 touchdowns worse? Nope. Albany looks like they might be even better. Mart kind of looks a little bit down from where they were, but Albany is playing at an incredibly high level. So give me Albany.
Give him Albany. All right,
and they beat our last DFW 5A or 2A Division II in Collinsville, so we get no DFW out of this game. So we have to at least say the team that beat the team that beat our last team. And really, when you look at Albany's journey, the one team, their one hiccup was against Munster, and that was the one game that they could have that could have gone against them, and maybe should have gone against them, but it didn't. And Albany learned from that, and I think they're going to take care of business.
Excellent. You want to talk about some 1A 6-man action?
I'm trying to learn about this one because I got to do pick'ems. I got to
Right.
defend my state championship as part of my annual review. If I get second, that's an embarrassment to inside high school sports. We just can't have that.
Take
And
your
I
shirt
feel
away.
like my job is on the line. That my only value to inside high school sports is being the reigning and defending pick'em champion. If Nolan Ruth or something is that, he's younger than me and more handsome than me. So you can just have him come on here the podcast, and you can be digging for Ruths or Ruthing for Wizdom or whatever it's going to be.
Baby Ruth.
Wiz and Baby Ruth, and he could probably talk hip hop better than I can too. So I feel a pressure to know my 6-man football. And in the 2 games, you got Westbrook against whoever they're playing.
Gordon.
I think Westbrook is what most people consider the favorite. I watched Westbrook versus Happy in doing my research, and I wasn't impressed by Westbrook. So I got to watch Gordon and see what I can find out of that. The other game, Benjamin against Oglesby. Benjamin's got the best 6-man player in the history of 6-man. I think Benjamin's going to have the 45 on him. So if you get there at 11 o'clock to film that game, I think by 11:45 you'll be done. But I'm going to try to get there for that 2 o'clock game to see the 6-man action before Toller. Westbrook and Gordon probably is right up there with Chapel Hill and Anna, and as well as Toller and Timpson as being the best pure 50-50 games out there. So if you're bored Wednesday afternoon, come on out to AT&T, hang out with me, and we'll watch some 6-man football.
Let's watch 6-man.
I'm taking Westbrook as of right now, but I haven't seen Gordon tape yet.
Okay. And you pick Benjamin and the other one?
Yeah, Benjamin by 4 to 5. We're gonna get the 45 rule on them.
They do have that rule. By the way, if you haven't been to 6-man, they play from 10 to 10. It's 1st and 15. You got 15 to get a first down. And extra points are extra points are 1 point, and no, extra points are 2 points because they want you to kick, or 2 points, and then 2-point conversions are 1 point. And if you kick a field goal, it's 4 points.
So maybe if you're there, you'll let me take the camera and film it, and maybe I can do my first ever social media. Put out there my first ever highlight tape.
Let's do
Maybe that'll be our on the job training.
Keep it steady, and then knowing you'll drop the camera, and it will be done for the whole weekend on some 6-man stuff. Unbelievable.
Well, fortunately, there's probably going to be a lot of cameras at AT&T, so you might be able to borrow one. And I think probably the biggest news that I'm surprised you did not lead off our podcast with is the Plano East Panthers go to Fayetteville, Arkansas, hooping on the hill, and beat some of the best Arkansas teams, and they win the Arkansas Hooping on the Hill basketball tournament by 37 points. They beat them 70 to 33. How about those Panthers?
I'm telling you,
we are the Arkansas Hooping on the Hill champion, brought to you by Shaq's Big Chicken or whatever they call it. Whatever Shaq's Chicken Shop is. They sponsored Hooping on the Hill, brought Plano East out there. Plano East wins it.
I'm telling you what, they're going to state, so you better get your little.
I've got my contingency plans ready.
Spring vacation.
And that's one thing I like about basketball that we don't have to really deal with in football. Unfortunately, is that they rank them 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
So you have you might avoid Duncanville or whoever it may end up being until the state finals. You don't necessarily have to play the second best team depending on how the regionals. But I'm sure Beaumont United or some Houston team might have something to say about that. But there's a decent chance that you can avoid them till this.
That's exactly right. They usually go by records. So 1, 2, 3, 4 by records. So if you play an easier schedule, all of a sudden you get thrown in as a number 1. If you play a hard. This is what happens with Madison. Every time Madison goes, the whole non-district, they play nothing but 6A, 5A teams. They go to state with a 19 and 11 record, and they get ranked 4, and then all of a sudden they go on through and win the thing. Back when they were hooping on the hill.
What about Faith Family? How does that work in all of this?
Well, Faith Family, they beat everybody they play, so they're usually going in on 30-5 record, something like that. So they usually rank number 1. But we got 1 versus 2 last year in the final, so. We just hate it. We hate it when 1 and 2 are in the best 2 teams are clearly in the semifinal just because of the record deal. But that's the way it goes. Hey, this is our final podcast, and I wanted to test out our viewership here. So I'm gonna be at state this whole weekend, minus Wednesday. I probably have to be with the kids on Wednesday, so I probably won't be there for the Toller game.
I get your credential.
You can have mine. You can have my credential and sit wherever I sit, which is on the field. Sideline Diggsy, he ain't doing that. But to test it out, if you guys see me, you probably won't see Diggsy because he won't have the hats with him. But if you see me on the sidelines, and you want to yell out to me and say, hey, I watched Digging for Wisdom or what have you, just to see. I got these hats, man. I'm going to bring a bunch of these hats. As you see the one I wear every week. For those of you that wear the flat bills, I got one. I'll have one of these as well. I'll probably have 5 or 6 of these with me. Holler out at me, say, hey, I don't like what Dig said on Digging for Wisdom. You get yourself a hat. God bless it. If you make a sign, oh my goodness. If you make a sign, I'll bring some of these shirts. I got shirts as well. You make a sign, you get a shirt. I just want to test out and see what kind of fandom we have. I don't wear these flat bill ones. I aged out of that one about 10 years ago, man. Those flat bills are for the young bucks. The old hats get the curve, man. Keep the sun out.
We have the challenge, the Wizard Challenge. You're bringing swag.
Bringing swag, man. Please don't make me bring back all 6 hats or whatever many I bring. Then I'll just be depressed and fire Diggs just like that. You're fired. Nobody watches this. And I put this on you really have to be an average watcher because I put this little challenge here on the tail end of the podcast. So you had to sit through his Plano East talk.
And you had to sit through 6-man football. So
yeah. So you're a real fan. If you know anything about this challenge, then you're a real fan of the podcast, and you'll definitely get one of these hats. So that's what I wanted to say. Diggs, we're done for the year.
What are you playing us out on?
We're playing this out on something I picked off of the internet that has no title, so don't worry about that. But if I could, I'd play us out on Paid in Full by Eric B. and Rakim, but I can't do that. I don't have the rights to it, so that's tough. But we will be back in February, brother. We're going to do that realignment special, and I'm looking forward to that. We usually have some coaches on, but we will definitely break down the new realignment, where everybody's going. Can DeSoto win in 5A if they choose not to opt up? All sorts of stuff. Lancaster, can they challenge in 6A in the Duncanville district? Some good stuff.
If Plano East makes a run to state, we will have a special basketball podcast.
All right. Well, we're still talking about that. We'll figure out. What if they don't? We don't have one?
We don't have one.
That's ridiculous.
It's that simple. Like, I can't talk faith family. I mean, what are you going to do about faith family? I mean,
we can talk about it. We'll have Brandon Thomas on. He'll talk about his own sport.
There you go.
All right. Enjoy state action. We'll see y'all next year for Digging for Wisdom. This has been a great year. Season 3. I appreciate you being with me, Diggs. We'll talk to you later. We'll talk to you guys later. Again, holler at me if you see me. Let's see if we can get you a hat.